Go in the background there.
Okay, so
okay,
we are recording.
We are recording. Fabulous. So we're talking about giving Gen X women a voice, which is your fab idea.
Yeah, and I just want to hear your thoughts, Claire, on how you feel about that kind of podcast. You know, my big vision is around gender equality in the industries that I've worked in, public sector and media and publishing. But something that I started thinking about a few years ago was Generation X women, so women born between 1965 and about 1980, 1981, depending on what scale you're looking at and which part of Google you're investigating, seem to, at the moment, and seem to always have been kind of like the silent generation.
Yeah.
And what I found through my perimenopause journey was that actually that's to our detriment, because we're not talking about things and we're not feeling a connection between us that we might have had when we were younger, you know, when there was Riot Girls, or we followed particular bands or got into kind of music. So it's kind of like wanting the podcast to be about giving Gen X women an opportunity to be heard and a voice, and giving them an opportunity to talk about something that they're passionate about, whatever it is, because I'm just
their interests, definitely.
Yeah. So how do you feel about that?
I
Gen
think
X
it's
women?
really fascinating. I think it's definitely, like you've said, this bit of a voiceless generation, if you compare it to particularly the ones that have come after us, you know, Gen Z, millennials, where, you know, having a social voice, you know, on your social media or wherever it is almost part of the course, whereas we're not that generation. We've said this in conversation before, we've been maybe quite transitional, where new things have started for us, or we've been a bit of a guinea pig year, perhaps in terms of education or styles and exams and curricula and so on. And then I think for most of us, coming towards the end, or at least the end of that period, things like mobile technology and social media was, as we'd kind of come out of our teenage years and we're moving into becoming young adults and professionals and considering our career. So we simply didn't grow up around it as much as maybe our forthcoming generations have done. And as a result, there's probably a bit of a lost chance, or an unrecognized chance maybe, that we haven't had this kind of way of amplifying our voices through social media. So when there are things that we might want to talk about, they're probably, and you found this in your own research anyway, haven't you, that there isn't really an angle where we fit in or feel comfortable, or indeed even addresses things that are kind of maybe dear to our hearts. So I think your idea is fantastic, because it's going to hopefully reunite some people maybe, or at least bring people who might be feeling quite sort of alone out there together, and, you know, reconnect a generation and feel that, you know, we could club together or band together and have a collective voice like many other of our generations seem to have. So I'm all for it.
And I think you've got something there in terms of like both what you've said. I want to pick up on what you said about kind of straddling the kind of the non-tech age and now the tech age, and
definitely
what that means for us as what we dealt with, but also that thing about, I was thinking about the generation before us, however you want to class the generation before us, so our parents had more physical face-to-face connections, I think, than we have had the opportunity to have as we've got older. So I'm thinking of things like, you know, it was much more kind of connected to if you had a particular faith, or if you're like a member of the Women's Institute or whatever kind of American equivalent of that, or even if you were part of the women's liberation movement and coming together within that movement, or even kind of, you know, the tail end of the civil rights movement at the time, there was something physical in those communities that connected you. That, you know, it's fantastic that we now see that kind of being brought online, certainly by the Gen Y, which is, I, you know, who are in effect not my personal kids, but our kids. We've actually done quite a bloody good job, actually, frankly, as a whole generation, of bringing up this new generation that are now very vocal. You know, I'm seeing that generation who are very open about talking about politics, who are very open about talking about equality rights in whatever form they want to talk to about, that kind of got that we kind of didn't get a chance to move forward on very much.
I think you're right. I think it's not that we bypassed it in terms of our own discussions. I just think our generation didn't take it online because it wasn't ready yet, and by the time it was ready, we were busy doing other things, notably becoming parents, maybe getting first jobs or being promoted and progressing. So it wasn't really kind of matching in terms of our generation's timeline, as you were. And I think we can be extremely grateful for those generations who have come after us in the way that they have used social media. There's a lot for us to learn or to pick up from, because we can see how you know, they've had some very frank and forthright conversations that need to be heard and need to be had, and we can find the issues that we could have, say social media and online technologies and mobile technology had happened 10, 15, 20 years earlier, we probably would be the ones everyone's telling to shut up. But the fact that they've told us to shut up anyway, probably in our lives, is why we need this podcast. But I think we just simply have missed out, just by chance, by timing, on this kind of fast moving social world where everything can be instantly accessed, it can be displayed online, you can find a cause, you can get involved in it, you can be an online, you know, lurker, you can be fully involved. Hopefully we're not promoting any keyboard warriors here, but do you know what I mean? There's that there's that different sense of you go to the internet maybe, or you go online to kind of voice your things, whereas we generally, well, we didn't have that as a means of doing it, and therefore you would have had to have relied on the previous ways, like the groups and things that you've mentioned. But then there was also sort of, I think, not necessarily, but there was also not really anything that we could pick up on ourselves at that time. So I think kind of engineering a new podcast where we can pick up on the issues that are key to us, that are important, or simply that we're passionate about, I think is going to be quite fun. It's going to be quite exciting, because I'm pretty sure that we all have a huge variety of things, but we will find some shared passions and things that can help enable some connections that we might not have been able to make, or even know that we wanted to make. But, you know, if we can get a bunch of our generation, women from our generation, talking about the things that interest us, and maybe even the things that make us angry, you know, we can make change for us as well. And you know, we see things that are, you know, people taking the changes forward. We can talk about, like you've said, you know, equality rights, the equality movement. We can talk about Extinction Rebellion, we can talk about climate emergency, we can talk about lots and lots of things. Obviously the most recent thing I think we would obviously have is Black Lives Matter, and these are huge, great, important and wonderful things to be involved in and supporting. And yes, fine, and we're not saying that we should distract from them or not join them or not support them, but then we also must, I think, find things that are our causes and our things dear to our hearts.
And I think that is
I think they can exist in the same space. I don't think one has to take primacy over another, but I think what's important is that we allow a space to occur where we can put those things out, and we can talk about them openly and collectively, and have, like I say, just have the space to do it.
I completely agree with you. Oh, I've got a little bit of that feedback.
I can't hear anything.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Don't worry, I'll edit it out. No, I won't, because I haven't got a clue yet how to edit podcasts. So we'll leave it in. It's all fine.
It's all authentic.
I think it is that sense as well for me, is that the tech came in too late.
Yeah.
For me it didn't coincide with the time when I was, on, for example, I was on CND marches and Soviet Jewry marches at quite a young age, and my great aunt marched in Aldermaston, so it's kind of like marching is in the blood, frankly.
In the blood, yeah.
But I became really disillusioned with protesting and marching as I kind of moved into my 30s, and part of that was probably coincided with kind of the early stages of social media, because it was kind of like, what am I marching for? What is that going to achieve? How does it go further than marching? And we see now fantastically that actually the kind of original ideas in terms of the internet and the power of the internet in terms of bringing people together and, I'm going to be hippie about it, having a more positive world, means that those protests are reaching further and are having impact as well. I mean, obviously, we can talk at some point as well about kind of the negative sides of social media and kind of everybody being connected via the internet, but that's a good feeling for me in terms of like, there's you can be more vocal about what you believe in and it will reach more people. And obviously that also is the negative side of other people have other opinions than I have, for example.
I think we're quite lucky in a way to have escaped the social media onslaught that's happened in many other people's youths and formative years. I was bullied at school, and I think if social media had existed then, it would have been 100% worse, 1,000% worse. And I shudder to think about how it could have been. And equally, it makes me feel very uncomfortable and frightened almost for children going through it at the moment, whether that's through a social media platform, whether that's through WhatsApp or anything that you can do where you are connected. So there are some significant downsides. But again, I think that's now a concern of our generation, because although we are not the ones with the children, our friends and families and colleagues are those parents of children who are going through this now. And that's just one thing that I think I would be quite passionate to discuss, that how social media is so wonderful in some areas but so destructive in other areas. And you can extend that to things like body image and the presentation of a socially curated life where everything seems to be perfect, and you've got a just so picture on Instagram or Facebook or wherever you share yourself. And I think that can be quite damaging. And equally, I find when I read things online, I love to look at Twitter, for example, to get news from around the world, from my sector, from academia and so on, and from other things that will be interesting and useful. But then at the same time, I have been known to regularly fall down the rabbit hole of comments that end up really frustrating me at times, or in fact enraging me to a point. And I think, again, because you've got people there sitting away behind their screens, tapping out whatever they feel like saying, and you don't know their motives and their reasoning, even the state of their mental health. So we don't know. And I think, again, that is a source of damage and a source of concern for me. So, I don't have children, but I have three nephews and a niece, and I will, be very aware of how they're starting to move online. My oldest nephew has just got a phone. It's very well protected and parental controlled by my brother, but that's going to change really, really quickly, especially as he, and in a few years, couple of years even, will go to secondary school. And I just worry about it becoming a tool for bad rather than good. So there are pros and cons to the whole thing, but I just really do thank my lucky stars that I never had social media as a young adult growing up. It would have just, I believe, made my life absolute hell.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I was bullied at the beginning of secondary school, and a few years ago, when the term cyberbullying started, someone did say to me, "Oh, well, what's all the fuss? I was bullied at school. It was fine for me, da da da." And I pointed out something they obviously hadn't thought about at that point, which was, but when we were bullied at a younger age, if we're being bullied by people outside of our home, I'm not even going to get into abuse from within the home. But if we were being bullied, for example, by people at school, you did have an element of safe space because you could go home. Most people, obviously not all, could go home and get away from it. But bullying now is 24/7.
Yeah, lives in your phone.
The kids cannot get away from it. So I think that's thank you, because that's given me a really good idea of someone to talk to as well around that for a podcast. Around it's about, we're the generation of parents at the moment that are also dealing with looking after our rapidly aging parents ourselves as well. True. How can we help build resilience in that childhood generation? I don't think they've been given a letter yet. Generation A, where do they go after Z?
Start again. Sure.
I'll ask my friend who's got a 10-year-old.
We need to know what the new generations are called.
Probably some psychoscience term somewhere. Anyway, but it's that thing about helping to build resilience up in their generation.
Yeah, definitely.
Also dealing with our aging parents.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that would be,
and how we keep ourselves safe.
Yeah, I think that would be a very interesting point anyway, I think, for the people of our generation as a thing to discuss, because we all have our concerns about parents at any age. We are now that generation who will have parents where things are starting to change, and I say that quite euphemistically because it will happen differently and at different rates to different people, but I see it a little bit in my own parents, where they're not now as quite as invincible as I thought they were or remember them to be, and little things. And if we're talking about social media in particular, my dad is horrified by the thought. He keeps himself well clear. He doesn't understand the mechanisms of it, and he doesn't want to. He doesn't believe that this is something that people should be doing, sharing themselves, displaying themselves so much online. And yes, he's can be a bit fearful of many things, but this seems to be a particularly horrific idea for him. My mum, bless her, she's very social media and technology. She's very adept, and she does lots of different things, and she's been doing, for example, during lockdown, she's been doing her yoga via Zoom and all of this, which I think is brilliant because she had to shield with my dad. So it's been a source of connection for her, but it is certainly a source of friction, I think, certainly between like me and my dad, when I say, oh, I just, said this on Facebook, or I read this on Twitter, and don't even get me started about how I had to explain Pinterest to him. Oh my God.
Remember, this is going live and he may hear you at some point.
He won't, because he won't be online. That's fine.
That's very true.
I can guarantee he will not make that journey to his computer. So, there are things where I think, okay, I said that we were in that transitional period, but we do remember that it must be even weirder for people before us as well, and to, in a way, some parts of your daily life necessitate the use of mobile technology and online things, and that can make things a little bit trickier if you're reluctant to do it or you don't understand it. So I think there's lots and lots of different things. And we seem to have picked up on the internet as our kind of central point of this conversation, which is quite interesting.
I think it's just ended up being kind of around social media and connection.
Yeah.
And connection with our generation and connection with other generations as well.
And I think really probably that's probably a core thing, because it's about different ways of connecting, and whether or not our generation do feel connected because of the way social media has sort of grown up and developed in our timeline and our lifetime, and gone beyond. Have we embraced it? Do we feel a bit left behind? Is it something for the new generation and we just, I don't know, like old people prod along on Facebook and everyone else has jumped to TikTok and Snapchat and all of that, which is things that I will never go anywhere near. But yeah, I do think that's probably quite a unifying thing. And things are very, very social media centric at the moment. So if you don't feel comfortable, perhaps again, it doesn't amplify your voice like it amplifies other people's. It actually silences you a little bit further.
And that's not even getting into, you know, the people who don't have Wi-Fi or maybe have like stuff going on at home and don't
have a means of doing that. Yeah. Which again then doesn't just extend to gender equality, but it's equality and equity across the board, because we cannot always assume that people do have those. And I think that's something that this lockdown has really highlighted, is that we assume that our generation and the generations that have come after us are, just because they grew up with social media, are A, kind of in tune with it, and B, have the access to it. And that simply isn't always the case.
And that massively gets into, you know, gender equality and stuff that gets looked at, kind of partner violence.
Yeah.
And also, you know, other areas of equality, certainly kind of people who I know who have got disabilities that have had massive issues with the lockdown and trying to stay connected with people.
Definitely. And it can be just really hard, and it can be, because it's so pervasive now, it's literally everywhere, everything's on demand, everything's instantly accessible. And so if you're an able user and someone who's confident and, you know, enough tech savvy enough to know how things, fine, you can be okay. But if you're not one of those people, of which there are significant numbers, then we forget that it's not as simple as that. It's not as easy. And again, how are those people's voices being heard or amplified or move forward and so on? Because
it gets into class as well, because if you again, it kind of how we've ended up, we both don't have kids, but we've ended up talking about kids a lot. I think that's the first for me in quite a while. But it comes back to, you know, a lot of the Fawcett Society research that they've been doing during lockdown. That class, even though it does in the UK doesn't come under the Equalities Act, class has massively been amplified in terms of the lockdown, because you might have a single mum that's got 3 kids who all need to be homeschooled. A single mum also needs to work possibly as well, and they've got 1 tablet between them. And possibly a crappy Wi-Fi connection wherever they're living as well.
Or maybe not even Wi-Fi in lots of cases. Like I, you know people who simply just don't have that. They don't have the connection and they don't have the piece of technology that enables that. And I think grand assumptions,
massively damaging.
Grand assumptions have been made that, oh yes, everything can switch online very easily, very quickly, and okay, everyone's in a learning curve. But there is a danger that people get left behind or forgotten even, which is even worse. So yeah, I think,
so if we can try and get some of the voices in the room.
Yeah, I think that would be important. I think it has to happen. And people beyond you and I have to be aware of those situations being probably far more the norm than they are the exception. So yeah, I do have, you know, quite specific concerns around around things like that, which I think tie in quite nicely again with the idea of equality, which is, I believe, how we started this conversation.
It is. I'm going to ask you one more question and then we're going to wrap it up. I have got no idea how long we've been talking for. About 15 minutes, about 20 minutes?
Yeah, I think so, 15, 20, something like that. You know us, we can yatter on for forever.
My days, yes. So I'm going to ask you one more question. If and this we've ended up talking about things that we're passionate about anyway, but if I come to you for a fuller podcast, is there something in your life or your work that you have a burning urge to talk about, that you're really passionate about?
I don't know. I mean, I do have lots of things that I'm passionate about. I think narrowing it down to one thing probably would have to be the start, and I'd have to think about it. I think mine would certainly be along the idea of ensuring everybody has equal access to be able to move through university or whatever they've chosen to do, with this equal access to opportunity to be successful. And a lot of my research that I've done is about generating student capital. So I've looked at this from a lot of different angles. So that certainly would be one area. But then I could probably talk about things in the vein, say, of, I don't know, Caroline Criado Perez, where we are women living in a very male-dominated, male-defined, male-tested, male-invented world. And, you know, where does that start to change? When do people start thinking about that, you know, the equality there and things, the importance that we've seen it again, lockdown and this pandemic has really highlighted things. Just simply that face masks have been designed around a typical male structured face, bone structure. And you've got lots of obviously women working through the NHS, people having to wear masks now as that's been coming in. Like, why aren't they designed to fit women as well? We exist as much as the men do.
It really reminds me of feedback, sorry. It really reminds me of before lockdown, when there were 2 female astronauts on the International Space Station, and it was going to be the first spacewalk with 2 female astronauts, and they had to, I can't remember if they cancelled it or delayed it because they didn't have 2 spacesuits to fit women, which was,
and that's just outrageous.
It just boggles my brain beyond words. And as a bit of a science geek, I was shouting at the TV when I saw these.
I do a lot of shouting at the telly, I have to admit. And then if you didn't want me to shut up and you needed me to fill hours and hours of podcast time, well, just start me on the Tories, to be perfectly honest. So, there we go. I mean, I've read some quite shocking things this morning. There's a brilliant guy on Twitter, Russ in Cheshire, I think his handle is, and he does these weekly summaries, you know, a week in Tory. And the one he's posted today is just beyond belief. And it's, you know, you can fact check it yourself if you don't believe that what he's saying is true. And I've gone through some things of his before in a Facebook debate. There we go, coming back to our chats about social media. But it's just, the way this country is being run, well, it's not being run, let's say that, it's being mishandled. And again, so many things around justice and equality and things are happening there, and the way they're now not so secretly dismantling the NHS and other things. I just find it shocking. So yes, there are probably many things I could get on my soapbox about, and you'll probably have to just say, Claire, shut up at some point. I will shut up, I do promise.
Well, I'm not going to say shut up, but I am going to bring this to a close.
Yes, let's do that. What a lovely conversation this has been.
It's lovely. I'm going to stop recording in a sec, so I will say au revoir from the podcast. and we'll see, hopefully, once I figure out the tech side.
There you go.
And this is purely, you know, so that I'm accountable, very accountable to my marketing accountability group run by a local businessman, Simon Batchelor. Big shout out to him and his Marketing Success Club. So we will see how these go.
Good.
Thank you so much, Claire.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me. I have enjoyed it.
No worries.
Yeah, bye-bye.